I didn't know it, but back in 2000, I met this woman named Susan Peters, who was in a wheelchair, and I didn't know that that moment was going to be a moment that changed my life forever. You see, other than my kids being born and my wedding day, the best moment of my life was watching that person, Susan Peters, who became my client, but also my friend, achieve victory in 2005 when she walked the 5K after coming out of a wheelchair. So if we back up to 1993, Susan Peters was hit head-on by a snowplow, leaving her pretty much paralyzed and in a coma, fighting for her life. And this once active, vibrant woman who had done things like horseback riding, bodybuilding, was a singer, just a very active, vibrant woman. She's gone from this active, vibrant woman to basically incapacitated and in need of therapy, barely hanging on. And to top that off, in addition to that, she went through a divorce because her husband tried to steal the money that was awarded to her from her accident to take care of her medical needs. So this was actually a big low point for Susan Peters. But there was something different about Susan Peters. Susan Peters proved early on that there was something different. She wasn't going to let her accident hold her down. And I knew this early on because she rolled into the club that day and came up to the training desk, and her mom had to do her talking for her. She could barely talk. But I had worked with people in wheelchairs before, so I agreed to take her on as a training client. And right away I knew something was different about Susan because she had a electric wheelchair that she took and would drive back and forth to the club every day. And one time going back home from the club, she was actually sneezed, and she actually sneezed and the thing careened off the path, and she rolled the wheelchair into the woods and was stuck there all night because she could barely talk due to the accident. Her vocal cords had been damaged, so nobody heard her. A lot of people would have, probably just had that, treated that as a setback, but not Susan Peters. There's something different about Susan. When I called her the next day when they were in the ambulance checking her out, when I heard what happened, she started to joke about it, and she called it her camp out. And I knew that there's something different about this person. To make a joke out about something that could have been so horrific and such a setback, I knew something was different about this woman. And I was going to find that out pretty quick as I started training her. So I started to train Susan, and our goal was to walk again. And we started to walk together, and pretty soon she got stronger, and she was able to walk from the trainer desk to the first studio, which is about 10 yards, then to the second studio, which is about 50 yards. Pretty soon we were going around the whole track in the club I worked at, which is about 200 yards. She was getting bigger, she was getting better, and she was getting stronger. And then one day in 2004, after we'd been working together for about 4 years, she was walking pretty good. She decided to do something crazy. She said she wanted to do a 5K. And Susan told everybody, I'm going to do a 5K. And a lot of people in the club were, the Minnesota nice thing. They were the patronizing smile. That's nice, Susan. Kind of that, we're happy for you, but we don't really think you can do it. And the doctor said she would never do it. A lot of people around didn't think she could do it, but I knew she could do it because I knew something was different about Susan Peters, and she'd proven that to me to this point. But little did I know she was going to continue to amaze me. So after she made that announcement, we had to step things up. We decided to move some of our workouts outside to get ready for the elements. We were on the sidewalks, uneven sidewalks, elements, just being outside. It's a little more unstable. Get her ready for the race. So we stepped up our training regimen, started doing some long walks. We actually brought in some more balance training. Then we upped her nutrition because it was key that she started to train like an athlete, because what she was doing was going to put a lot of stress on her body. And there was one day in particular where we really turned a corner, where we used to walk around this little lake called Early Lake. It was about a half to 3/4 mile walk we did, but we decided to go around the whole lake one day, which is about a 1.25 miles, mile and a half. And it was a hot day, hot and humid, and Susan hated heat. But I said, we're going to do something big. We're going to go around the lake, and she agreed to it. Well, three-quarters of the way around the lake, maybe halfway around the lake even, she started to get tired, started to get overheated, and when Susan got tired, the F-bombs come out, the potty mouth. She started to call me names and get mad at me, but you know, I was determined, being her guide, that I wanted her to finish this, even if I had to drag her butt around that lake. We finished that lake, and I did pretty much have to drag her for the last half, but as I threw her in the car, she smiled at me, knowing that I had pushed her to a new level, that we had just turned a big corner because we had done about a half a 5K in pretty tough conditions, being really hot. And there was something new that ignited to that training to a new level, and the 5K became a reality. So fast forward a couple more months after that, we signed up for the Mammoth Monster T5 dash, which is in Lake Harriet, and we call Channel 11, a local news station, to come follow us, tell them we got a woman that's going from a wheelchair to a 5K, and they're like, we're all over that, we're gonna come cover that. And so we get to the race a week before the race day, and we go to the lake, and we try to decide we're gonna do a practice run on the course. Well, it's windy, it's cold, Susan's all off kilter, nothing's going right. So I make a judgment call as her guide and her coach to say, you know what, we're gonna rest. Athletes rest before the day of the week of an event. We're gonna rest your body, chiropractic massage, active recovery, good nutrition, and we're gonna make sure the batteries are fully charged for the race. So that's what we did. We got to the race day, get down there, it's chaotic, and I make sure that the hard part was getting to make sure Susan wasn't going to use up a lot of energy trying to get to the starting line. So we got her down close enough to the starting line where we could start in a good place and not burn up all her energy. So we get going on the race, and she's doing great. Channel 11's following her along. And Susan, being Susan, starts talking a little good-natured smack and kind of mugging for the cameras, doing her Susan thing. And you know, she's doing great as we get halfway around the lake. But then comes that second half of the 5K. We're getting around the other side of the lake, and she starts to get tired. Her body starts to hurt, her feet start to hurt, her body's starting to shut down on her, and here come the F-bombs again. Remember I told you, Susan, when she gets tired, the mouth gets, the potty mouth comes out. But we'd come so far, so I'm encouraging her, we're going through this, and all of a sudden we get down to that final leg, and we see all these people around the lake that had gathered, that had heard about what Susan was doing, and all of a sudden she has this fan club down there cheering her on. You can hear the crowd noise roaring down the side of the lake down there. And we start walking down the final run, and the Minneapolis police had been there, and they were doing a special event, so they set up Sue's police tape to set up a special finish line just for Susan. You couldn't have planned this any better. So we're cruising down. Crowd noise gets louder as she gets closer, cruising down. She gets her second win. You know, when you get that second win, you can feel that momentum. All of a sudden there's somebody like put a quarter in you. That was Susan. She starts getting closer and closer to that finish line, and pretty soon we get up close, and as we get across that finish line, I raise her arm up in victory, and I can still think about that moment, and it still brings chills to me and chokes me up, honestly, because I just couldn't believe that everything played out that day as much as it could. So I watched Susan have this victory, and that day will stick with me for the rest of my life. So as I got through that event, that life-changing event taught me three things. First thing was how important it was to have a guide. I'm never going to take all the credit, but I'll tell you what, Susan probably would have not pushed herself as hard as she could have, as good of an attitude as she could. She needed a person there to put a plan together and make sure she followed through with it, and to keep pushing her forward so that when we came to that 5K, that it was going to be a reality. The second thing was to have vision and purpose. You see, Susan always envisioned herself as that vibrant person. Even though she'd been in an accident, her body was not working right, her mind was intact, and she saw herself going back to being an independent person. She did not want to live on disability. She had too much pride in herself for that, and she saw herself doing that, and she had that vision in front of her. Even when she had setbacks, when she fell, when things didn't go right, she always envisioned that and kept that vision right in front of her. And third is, no matter where we're at, we can always come back. A lot of us feel like, you know, we've got tough lives, we've got challenges, but I'll tell you what, if Susan Peters can go from a wheelchair to a 5K, we can all work out a little bit harder, we can all eat a little bit cleaner, we can all discipline ourselves a little bit more. And every time I start to go into the pity party mode, I always think back to this moment in my life, like how that was so inspiring. I was her coach, but she was really the one that coached me and inspired me. So, that being said, to this day, Susan Peters does not have a wheelchair. She lives on her own. She's completely independent. She accomplished those things, and you can accomplish those things too.